So, welcome, Charlene.
Well, I'm just thrilled to be a guest on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm thrilled you agreed to come on. We want to have a conversation today, about things that are not pleasant, I guess, things that people would prefer to avoid the conversation about, but I think it's a very important conversation to have. So I'm really grateful and really blessed that you've agreed to come and chat about all this stuff so that we can raise awareness and maybe change perspectives or maybe even add a deeper perspective, to people's thoughts because it's not the kind of thing that you spend a lot of time thinking about because of the your own personal discomfort. I suppose we should tell people what we're talking about, shouldn't we?
I was going to say yes.
And I'll let you sort of tell all the details, but basically, let me just read your quick thing. Charlene Pell, this is who I'm talking to today, is the founder and executive director of Facing Forward, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping individuals with congenital or acquired facial or physical differences contend with staring, improve control of social interactions, and communicate more confidently. And why this has come about is that Charlene was in a plane crash in 30 years ago, or 32 years ago, 1994, and suffered significant burns to 64% of her body, killed her fiance, spent 7 months in hospital, 49 surgeries, and 5.5 years in rehab. So none of that sounds appealing to anybody. To to it's you're
Yeah,
here, you survived.
yes. It's a miracle I'm here. Yes.
Mm. So I don't even know where to start. I've got a whole list of dot points that I want to cover because the topic fascinates me, but troubles me, scares me, um, pains me. Like there's a lot of emotions for me, and I'm not living with this condition. And I can, well, I can say I can only imagine that's not the truth. I can't actually imagine. So let's sort of dig in and cover some of this stuff. And do you want to start with the plane crash and just so we can get a picture of it?
Sure, we can do that, but I do want to have time for you to ask all those questions because I'd love to hear your questions. But
Yeah.
the actually the plane crash occurred. It was when we left Fort Lauderdale. That was our home, and when I say we that was my fiance at the time, Roger Craig and I. And Roger was a pilot, had been a pilot since he was 14 years old, was a great pilot. Anyhow, it was a picture perfect day for flying, and we were flying over to Cat Island. And Cat Island is one of the farthest most islands in the chain of the Bahama Islands.
Yeah.
And so, like from the United States to when we were in Miami, and so not Fort Lauderdale, but flying over there, you have to clear customs at a place called Eleuthera at Rock Sound. And then from Rock Sound to Cat Island, it's only about a 10-minute flight. But so, anyhow, flying over was fine. Won't go into all the details about all that, but we had cleared customs and then got off on our way for our last 10 minutes of our flight. And as we were coming in over the ocean as he was landing the airplane, the right landing gear did not lock.
Oh God.
And so it was you have to visualize where this happened to. It's an island 32 years ago. Those big clunky mobile phones, just the very
Yeah.
first phones were coming out. But we were going to an island, without a tower, and everything was powered by generators.
Mm.
There was no such thing as like a manned airport or any sort of EMT or a fire truck. There was one doctor for the whole island and one little cinder block building where the doctor saw the people on the island.
Mm.
So nothing in the way of emergency care. And so we come in, and as Roger's trying to land the plane, um, there's a hill at the end of the landing strip. And what happened when that gear didn't lock, he, of course, is trying to get the plane back in the air.
Mm.
And the left wing of the airplane clipped a pine tree. And so then that started causing the crash of the plane to
Mm.
catapult down into, it was like 40 feet, I learned later,
Oh.
off of the runway. And sadly, but miraculously, there were some little children that must have seen this all happen that were out near this landing strip because after the plane crashed, and I must have sustained a concussion because I was sitting in the co-pilot seat. I always sat next to Roger, and and in that seat. But I was doubled over, still with my seatbelt on. But it was as if I came to um, out of the crash, and then I looked to kind of gather my wits about me and look to my left, and I can't. I see there's no way out of the airplane, and then the only way out is to be out, climb out the same window that Roger climbed out of. And so I make my way over to the cockpit window, and I don't know if he thought I was dead. I'm not sure. I'm not sure when I came to why I wasn't coming to with him shaking me or something.
Mm.
I can only presume that he must have thought that I was dead. But when I got to the window, he started screaming, jump, jump, jump. And everywhere I looked around me, the grass and the brush was on fire.
Mm.
And, yet there was a small area. And so, I jumped down, and then he was trying to part the brush. And if you haven't been to the Bahamas, or I guess into like a jungle or someplace, that there's no way for me to describe the thick, dense brush. I mean,
Mm.
it's just impenetrable. And I'll never forget, he was trying to brush that, make my way for me. And he said, to try to be careful so I don't get all cut up in the brush. And then the next thing I know, I'm propelled to the ground by a deafening explosion.
Oh my.
And the only way I can explain it is I felt like somebody had thrown a vat of boiling water on my back.
Mm.
And that's, I guess my hands probably, the underside of my hands were protected when I hit the ground. And thank God my eyes, I mean, my whole face was burned. I had no idea till 3 months later when I came out of a coma that my whole body had been burned. What the impact of uh, uh, was felt on my back, like kind of from the waist up. And anyhow, I lost track of him after the crash. And I, screaming and trying to connect with him, we could not connect. But I could hear those voices of those little children. And I kept calling to them because I knew that they were going to be on the runway. And if I had gone the other way, I would have died because I would have been headed towards the road,
Mm.
and it would have been impossible. Although again, nothing seemed to be impossible on that particular day because with all of my being, I truly believe that God spared my life that day because there's no rational reason at all how I endured all of this and the things that happened afterwards. We don't have time to go through all of the details, but I can tell you that um, I rode in a truck for 45 minutes, sitting. Like, I'll never forget, like, my tush was one of the few things that wasn't burned, and I was sitting on the edge of the seat in this truck, and I was telling the grounds fellow and who watched over our house and everything, who was uh, driving us to um, another area of the island where some more pilots could fly us to Miami. But I was just saying, don't touch me, don't touch me. But even though I was doing that, and I was in agonizing pain, I did not have any understanding that I had been engulfed,
Mm.
in flames. But anyhow, we endured that ride, and the Nathaniel is the wonderful Bahamian fellow who was helping us, and everybody talks with walkie-talkies on the island, and so he was talking, and a couple of again, thank God for this, that there were two doctors that we knew who happened to be on the island. One was an orthopedic surgeon named Jack Kim, and the other was a Navy flight surgeon named Bill Skellinger. And these two wonderful men agreed to get on this other flight where two pilots generously volunteered to try to get us to Jackson Memorial
Mm.
Hospital to Ryder Trauma Center. And so um, they they flew us over, and the two doctors did what they could do, to try to keep us alive. And the only medicine they even had with them was a little bit of Demerol.
Oh my
And
God.
they were terrified that they might have to try to give us a trach on a dark,
Mm.
interior of an airplane,
Mm.
and the pilots didn't have enough fuel to get
Oh.
all the way to Miami, so
Oh.
we had to stop again in Eleuthera. And then in customs, of course, but we're unrecognizable. All our belongings have been, burned.
Mm.
So we don't have any ID or anything like that. And they had the wrong fuel truck there. So there was so
Oh.
I just kept
Oh.
thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. One complication after another, but it literally took 6 hours from the
Oh.
time of that accident to get to a trauma center. And even when we got to the airport in Miami, after I was able to hear the pilots being patched into the burn unit that there to let the doctors know we were coming so they'd be ready for us. There wasn't an ambulance at the airport. It was
Oh.
just unimaginable the
Wow.
things that happened. But anyhow, I mean, there's lots of details
Mm.
that that are in between all of that. But we made it, you know, we made it to the trauma center. And, I was still lucid, able to give the EMTs my
Wow.
sister's phone number and my drug allergies and things like that.
Wow.
And then, of course, once I could, give them my basic information, then they started giving me something that knocked me, probably
Mm.
morphine or something that
Mm.
that knocked me out. And I saw the EMT, I saw them help Roger get onto a gurney, and that was the last time that I ever saw him. And even on the rescue flight, I'm because I'm so horribly burned, I couldn't sit on a regular seat, like the
Mm.
visors you put on your
Mm.
windshield to
Yeah.
keep it cool, keep the car cool. Well, I was on the floor of the airplane, sitting on my tush, with my feet. My feet and my ankles weren't burned because I had on real thick uh, tennis socks and shoes. And just sitting there like this. And even though I was looking across at Roger and seeing him get, you know, all swollen and all red. It didn't connect, It's like that any of that was happening. There's a process called disassociation
Yeah.
that when something horrific like this happens, that really it's the body's way of protecting
Mm.
the brain that you just can't survive such pain and
Mm.
trauma and so
Yeah.
I still had, a sense of things, but not, you know,
Mm.
not fully in any way. And so then, I spent, oh my gosh, like about 61 days or 70, 61, 71 days in this morphine-induced coma that was being in a coma on morphine. It's the like being in another dimension of life.
Mm.
The hallucinations that I had were either ludicrous, funny, just wild kinds of things. The balloons, like in ICU, you can't have flowers. So there were lots of balloons, unbeknownst to me till later when I saw the
Mm.
pictures. All these balloons, and at night, those balloons took on a life of their own. They became all kinds of creatures and doing all kinds of things. And then it was either like that or something bizarre, like one of the hallucinations was I felt like I was in this almost like maybe a baby feels in a womb, like some sort of dirigible that you're pushing and pressing and you can't escape it, you can't get out of it,
Oh,
like things like that. Or either I was like in a dungeon with these Darth Vader kind of looking creatures and pitchforks and fire. And I mean, it's just wild,
wow.
wild and bizarre. And for parts of it were terrifying for me. And then, as I said, other parts were entertaining. But what I discovered later about all of these hallucinations was there was a thread of reality in all of them. Like one of the hallucinations was I would see this Spanish looking fella who was on a motorcycle and he had a bandana and he was smoking pot and his motorcycle was circling around the room every night and just go wildly. It turns out that the man on the motorcycle was my occupational therapist.
Oh, wow.
So I had been seeing him but not real, but
Yeah.
in some form of consciousness. And then, when I they started weaning me off of the morphine, then I could connect the dots about what this was all about. And one of the things that I saw in the hallucination actually had something to do with my boss that had been away on her honeymoon on the day of the
Wow.
accident. I mean, it was really fascinating. But
Wow.
it like being, well, I guess the only thing I can relate it to, I mean, I've never done any hallucinogenic drug or anything like that.
Mm.
So my best guess would be that it would be that sort of experience
Wow.
that somebody could relate to. But again, I do not want to. I would never want to go back to that place,
Mm.
preferably. But anyhow, really, weaning you off of morphine takes much longer
Mm.
than one might expect. And after this happened to me, like the day that I first saw myself. Um, And I can send you some pictures too to add at another time if you'd like to do that. But
Mm.
when I first saw myself, this was actually when I was in the rehab center shortly after I got there. And um, the only thing I could relate to in looking at myself, because my goodness, I only weighed about 90 pounds. I was really emaciated. And everything was red, and I didn't recognize much of anything about my face but my eyes. I did recognize
Mm.
my eyes, and oh, and my mouth was this tiny, tiny, tiny little circle kind of thing because of all the burns. But um, all I could think of is pictures of survivors from the Holocaust.
Oh,
That
wow.
was the only image
Yeah.
that I could relate to from my experience.
Mm.
And that's important later on in my work because that has a lot to do with why people stare and
Mm.
the fact that when we encounter, when any of us, myself included, when we encounter someone who looks like someone that we've never seen before,
Mm.
or anything in nature, it can be flower a flower or a plant or anything that's out of our experience realm or knowledge realm, it takes the mind, the brain a few seconds to
Mm,
kind of try to figure out, okay, what am I seeing?
mm.
That kind of, and there's actually a part of the brain called the fusiform that recognizes faces. And I've learned through my research that if there's a 1 millimeter of a difference, like in the placement of any feature on somebody's face, that triggers somebody to stare.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of science behind
Yep.
staring as well. But anyhow, going back to that moment when I saw myself, the main thing I thought at that time, again, still on morphine, but regaining my ability, to think clearly. Um, I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to do everything I can do to try to live
Mm,
because, I really look like somebody that's on the brink of dying. And I thought as well, even though, of course, I cried when I saw myself, but I didn't. I mean, I always tell people I look like Cinderella now compared to what I looked like
mm,
32 years ago.
mm,
And I, c- I didn't, grasp the extent of my injuries and everything at that time. But I did very quickly come to the realization I had two choices.
mm,
I could either be bitter and mad and angry at the world for the rest of my life, or I can say, okay, I'm going to just try to get strong and make the best of this and try my best to find a way to regain as much of my life as I possibly can.
mm,
And that was the decision that I made. And I was so very blessed to
mm,
have such a loving, devoted mother and sister that one or the other of them were with me every day of this nightmare for over a year.
wow.
And that made a huge difference. And so many people do not have that kind
Yeah.
of support. So, I mean, I was very blessed in that way. I was also blessed to have, the best medical care that was available at the
Mm,
time. Um, and again, some friends that, uh, you know, stood by me and others that couldn't get past what had happened to me.
mm,
And of course, my faith. And I think it's important. It's important for me to tell um, you this and anybody who might listen to this or watch this podcast that, I mean, growing up, I grew up in a Christian home and I was very involved in church and uh, raised as a Methodist and, had such a loving, devoted mother. And we were just very active. And my mother had a gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful voice. That's what I miss most
mm,
about her is her beautiful voice. And she sang in the choir. And, you know, I, I was just had a very strong faith until I got to college. And then after I took anthropology, I couldn't find God.
yep.
I was
Yeah.
trying, okay, where's the proof? I need the
Yeah.
proof of God. And kind of what happened over the next few years in my adult life, it was sort of like a roller coaster. I mean, I never really lost my belief, but I didn't have the same faith
Mm,
continuously. And sadly, I had almost become agnostic before this accident. And foolish me at the time of this accident, I thought I was in control of my
yeah.
life. And guess what?
Mm,
That's not true. Um, but I really was so self-reliant and very independent like my mother had taught me to be those things and she had taught me how to brush myself off and get back up and
mm,
get back out there and just not be defeated by the disappointments in life. And that's such a gift that she gave me.
Yeah.
And that really helped me get through a lot of this. And so, again, sadly, everybody does not have
Yeah.
this. And everybody, no matter whether it's a burn injury or an illness or the loss of a loved one or a divorce or whatever it is, we're all unique and different and have different strengths and
Yeah.
weaknesses and resources or lack thereof. So, it's everybody's got their
Yeah.
own
Stuff.
situation to,
Yep.
yeah,
That's right.
stuff to deal with. And yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you ask questions.
But that's why we should be try to be kind as often as possible.
Oh,
I know that we can't all be kind all the time, but if it's our primary focus, that we do try to be, and remember that everybody's got a story, everybody's got something going on, changes the world. But so I'm interested in well, first of all, the coma. We don't have to talk about it, but it just you've sort of shocked me a bit because I thought in it when someone was in a coma, they were asleep. Although saying that, my sister died. It's a long story. I won't go into all of that. But when she was in a coma, I was telling her things, and she was answering me by squeezing my finger, yes or no, and I was telling everyone else you can communicate with her. Just get her to squeeze your finger, and she was. But I didn't realize it was so lucid. I just thought that the brain must have been hearing stuff and responding out of this unconscious sort of response, but you've made it sound a little bit more exciting.
well, and it may not be the same for everybody. I don't know. It probably depends on the amount, the
Yeah,
dosage,
maybe.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know. But I also did the same thing that your sister did. And I want to tell you too. I don't recall how long it's been, but I know that was just a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, devastating, and life-changing loss for you. So I'm
Oh,
very sorry, but I know she's got to be smiling,
yeah.
seeing what you are doing in the world. She
Yeah.
has to be.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
too, well, I couldn't squeeze my
No.
sister's hand. My hands were so burned, but I could blink. When I
Oh,
was
yeah.
finally,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
started being able to blink.
Yeah.
And so, and what you said too, reminds me of a caution that all the doctors had given my mother and sister, and that's that they were never to mention anything about Roger's death to me,
Mm,
until I could think clearly. And
yeah.
they were and many other things because there's a lot of research that I'm sure tells us that people in comas can hear,
Here.
I-
Yeah.
hear. Yeah. So your sister may have heard everything that you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Um, and again, well, you know, I don't know. I don't know
Mm.
the answers to all that, but
Neither do I. But the thing is though, hearing different perspectives and hearing different experiences is what we should be seeking in life. To just to expand our own knowledge and our own understanding of stuff. When you were before the accident, you had a very high profile job, very successful job, and but you had 5.5 years of rehab. Did you ever, like when you came out and saw your face for the first time? Did you think I'm never going back to work, or sort of like because you had that successful job, it must have meant a lot to you. It must have been a strong part of your identity. Did you sort of have an identity crisis and going, I'm never going to work again. No one's going to want me, or maybe I'll never be good enough, or like I'll be discriminated against. Like, did you have that kind of moment?
you know what? That this is a really interesting. I could I could not understand how my how I could have lost my career through no fault of my own. in the beginning. I also had no earthly idea how much of my identity was tied up in what I did and who I was at work. And of course, we spend most
Mm.
of our life at work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had sometimes worked 3 jobs trying to, I was trying to live the life that society
Yeah.
told me was a successful life. You know, I, I, at the time, I mean, I think looking back on all of this, I was too caught up in that. I've always been a very good, caring, loving person. But, I think that I was kind of in that live fast, love hard,
Yeah.
die young kind of, just really striving to have that life that I had always dreamed of. Um, and I I could probably I couldn't understand why I couldn't have my job back, really. I mean, and
Mm.
it's if you could see what I look like, and then how this didn't make any sense at all to anybody else. But in my mind, the only thing that I didn't lose in that accident was my mind.
Mm. Mm.
I mean, I lost literally my appearance, my skin, my livelihood, my home, even some of my possessions, um, my future, my dreams. I thank God I didn't lose my mother and my sister
Mm.
and my faith. And my belief in myself as well. There's a chapter in my book where it's called "What Shall We Call You Now?"
Mm.
Um, and that was the point when I actually that was a couple of years into my recovery, when I was going to go back to work in some capacity. I always wanted to go back to work. When I was in rehab, I was really put off by the recreational therapists that wanted to give me arts and crafts for
Mm.
my
Mm.
rehab. I wanted to be reading all the journals that I needed to read to keep up with my job.
Mm.
And I looking back on this, I'm very appreciative of this. But even when I was in the rehab hospital, my bosses were still coming out to show me different campaigns that the person who was filling in for me had put together to get my opinion, or they really wanted me to get a laptop and to start
Mm.
doing some things, but the doctor said no,
Mm.
that would interfere with my recovery. But I wanted to do it too.
Mm.
Not realizing how important it was for me to do those arts and crafts and to get those skills back and
Mm.
to go through the rehab. I mean, it was as if I just wanted to plow through
Yeah.
that rehab and get back to my job. Um, but the getting to that point where I finally, I mean, oh my gosh, I had to, I mean, I had to learn how to talk and be able to open my mouth enough to eat and have, all these surgeries to be able to do this and be able to drive a car again and going through all of that, there was like the goal of going back to work. That was what was in my
Mm.
mind at the time. And so I was devastated at that meeting when my boss told me that, I wouldn't be able to step back in my job, but it was totally unrealistic. I mean, there's no way that I could physically do that. I mean, I had to have a surgery like every 8 weeks. Was in
Mm.
rehab of one kind or another. But in my mind, I was still so driven
Yeah.
to do that. And I think it was a forum at the time of me trying to hold on to that past life in a way,
mm,
to
mm,
hold on to that identity that that had really been stolen from me in a way. But what happened when I went back to work part-time, and it was a different capacity, instead of having my corner office that I had a little desk outside my office. And I did, my boss in the company, they were wonderful to me and to my family throughout all of this. And they did give me a project that was totally mine that I could own and really worked with me. But what happened as I started doing that, as I quickly saw that that's not what I wanted to do the rest of my life.
mm,
The more I was out in public, the more I experienced people staring at me
mm,
and seeing these very awkward, unpleasant interactions. The more I started thinking, oh my gosh, there are not any resources out here to help us.
yeah,
There aren't any programs to teach us how to reintegrate back into the workplace or into society or into school or and then I started in therapy meeting all these other burn survivors or trauma survivors. And and I was again very blessed that a fellow named Alan Breslow, who was the founder of the Phoenix Society, just through a simple phone conversation when I couldn't do anything for myself at all. My sister held the phone to my ear so I could talk to this man who had also been severely burned
mm,
and disfigured in a private airplane crash
mm,
years ago, had founded the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors. And it was still in its young years of development, and they did have an annual event, but they really didn't have any courses or
yeah,
about helping people reintegrate this sort of thing. They had
mm,
peer support sorts of things,
yeah,
but not with trained peer supporters. So anyhow, I just decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in some capacity trying to help other people go through
mm,
this so it's not so painful and difficult.
yeah,
And then again, reading everything I could find about staring and research about that and trauma. And, my background in communications and public relations really helped me use some of my own
mm,
experience there with the research. And then I developed this program, just that simply what to do when people stare. And that's about understanding, why people stare and learning social skills
mm,
to ease those awkward social
yeah,
interactions, make them more comfortable. And it's the workshop. The essence of it is it reframes staring
yeah,
so that people don't take it so personal, so
yeah,
that they understand what we talked about before, like the science.
mm,
They understand the beauty mystique, that the world since the
yeah,
beginning of time
yeah,
has been, obsessed with beauty
yeah,
and the connection between moral beauty and disfigurement and evil
mm,
and media representation
mm,
that villainizes us all the time
yeah,
and bias. But there isn't anything else that goes through this process. The Phoenix Society, a woman named Barbara Quell, developed a program many years ago that it's called the STEP program, and it's about social skills to help burn survivors reintegrate. And so that program, and then the wonderful James Partridge, that I don't know if you know about James
no,
or not, who
no,
started the organization called Changing Faces. James was ahead of me in his survival in the UK, also a major facial burn and body burn. And he created that phenomenal organization and became, quite a champion of psychosocial services
Mm.
for people with facial disfigurement and burns. And so, the kind of James Partridge and going back to Alan Breslow were the real pioneers. And then, other people that I could tell you about, a couple of people before them, but there's still to this day, are there not any standardized programs
Yeah.
for this? But the Phoenix Society does have a lot of programs and a lot of resources. And then
Mm.
on my website, I do have resources too,
Yeah.
books and videos and things like that. And of course, I work with people one on one,
Mm.
whether it's face to face or virtually, and
Yeah.
do, virtual presentations to students. And prior to COVID, was doing a program called Outside, Inside, You Decide, which was really
Mm.
something I so enjoyed. And I just ordered your book I'm supposed to get it on Sunday, about magnificent kids,
Oh, yeah.
because I'm sure there are going to be some wonderful examples in there. Because what I do in this program is I introduce students to all these amazing
Yeah.
other students with disabilities, and show them the exciting things that they're accomplishing and the fulfilling lives they're leading, to help dispel these myths that people and the misconceptions that
Yeah.
people have about disfigurement or visible differences
Yeah.
and our intellectual disabilities. And I'm just beginning to learn about autism. I know you know so much about that. I mean, I just, I'm kind of on the cusp and want to know much more about that. But,
Mm.
if you know from your own work how even with teachers, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they have lower expectations
Yeah.
of students with disabilities. And, this puts us at a disadvantage.
Mm. That's a very it does actually. And when you talk about that beauty mystique, and there's a bias, and I don't remember what it's called, but it's about when we think people who are, are good looking are more trustworthy and are more likable, and I can't remember what it's
Yeah.
actually called. And then the opposite end of that is anyone who looks different, or anyone who looks a little bit scary, or anything I don't understand about someone, or that, just that little bit of difference, is then I put them in the end of I don't trust them. I don't feel safe. And it's you talk a lot about, well, there's a couple of things. You've got your book. So this program you're talking about is under uh, your
Facing forward.
your business or initiative called Facing Forward,
Right.
yeah, and helping people sort of move through it with all your programs. But you've also got your book, In This Altered Body, which you referenced before. Did what made you go? I mean, of course, I can see, but just for my listeners, what made you go from saying, I'm doing these programs under Facing Forward and I'm just helping people, to, no, bugger it, I've got a book in me, I'm going to get that out? Because a lot of people just don't get over the line with a book. It's like no one wants to hear what I've got to say. What could I say that's important? But what pushed you over
I,
to do that?
I almost felt like I had a responsibility. I mean, I'm like one of a handful of people on this earth who have lived through
Yep.
something like this. And I literally feel like I've lived with two identities, because I've had two dramatically different appearances. One
Yep.
as a very attractive woman,
Yep.
and then one as a disfigured woman. And
Mm.
the world treats you very differently with
Yep.
those different faces and bodies.
Yep.
And I thought too that it would help people understand and see that, you know, that if there are, and I'm not the only one, I mean, there are many, many people who have written wonderful books about their experiences of overcoming very traumatic
Mm.
injuries or illnesses or losses
Yep.
and those sorts of things. But I think that what we bring is hope, because
Mm.
if I can get through something like this, then I feel like there's there's hope that anybody can, but I do want to qualify that because I don't like it when people say, well, if I can do it, you can do it, because then that you have to go back to the fact that we're all different.
Yep.
We don't all
Yep.
have the same advantages,
Yeah.
disadvantages, resources. So that
Mm.
is not true. But I think that there is something about that that if you never give up, if you just keep, if you've got that persistence and determination, that it may not be exactly the outcome that you dreamed up, but it might be close.
Mm.
And with the book for me, I literally started pitching this book back when I met Sam
Mm.
20 some years ago, maybe
Wow.
25 years ago. Um, Sam, I met her through the Florida Speakers Association. Then she
Yeah.
got me involved with NSA. And then I had the great fortune to go to the Maui Writers Convention.
Yeah.
And literally, my book would not be the book that it is today had I not done all of those things because of the people I met along
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
and the things, the lessons I learned and and just the whole process that led me here. And the book has evolved. I started writing the book as a self-help book because
Mm.
that's what I really wanted it to be. And then as I tried to pitch it and get it published, I kept getting discouraged because I did not have my master's. And so I got, it's like nobody wants to read a self-help book with somebody who doesn't have the credentials. Now, meanwhile, some of my favorite doctors said, you're wearing the credentials,
Exactly.
you're living the
Yeah.
credentials, but not the publishing world, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, and anyhow, and I wanted to go back and get my master's earlier than I did. I went back much later in life. I think, I mean, I was out of school like 40 years when I went back, and my peers had just gotten out of college. And I mean, I was an outlier in every respect, but they were wonderful and helped me work through all my technological challenges. But I still have a lot of those. But anyhow, it's like, so I was discouraged from the self-help book, but I've got boxes. I look over this way because I have all this stuff. I have boxes of of typed pages of things that started out self-help
Mm.
that then I was encouraged to go the memoir
Yeah.
route.
Yeah.
So that's what then I started studying and reading everything I could and reading all the other memoirs and learning what I could about that. And I mean, I don't know how many drafts you went through with your books, but I have boxes,
Not
boxes of
many.
them. Yeah. And along the way met some amazing people, made some wonderful relationships. But yeah, I kept saying as the years, over the last 20 years, I've got the greatest regret I'm going to have if I die is if I don't write that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just said, okay, just you've got to make time and just do it.
Yeah.
And so then that's when it happened. And even that experience talking about disappointments, it took me over 20 some years. And I finally, finally, without an agent, got a publisher. And it's like, it's that email you wait for forever
Yeah.
that we'd be happy to publish your book. And then get this, I waited 102 days for a contract,
Wow.
never got a contract,
Oh.
got the runaround. That's another story. But,
Oh.
and it's turned out to be one of those, as the song says, unanswered prayers that you
Yep.
thank God for,
Of
because what
course.
a nightmare that would have been.
Yep.
So again, I just thank God for the whole thing. But it's I think, and you probably agree with me, uh, there there's a little bit of luck some people seem to have a lot of luck,
Yeah.
but most people have to really, really
Work for it.
work
Yeah.
and be doggedly
Yeah.
persistent and just keep facing one disappointment after another
Yeah.
and say, I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
I'm going to find a way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I did with the book. And I'm so thankful because I I only wish it had happened 10 or 15 years ago. I really do.
Mm.
Then because I'm sure you've experienced this with your books, the people you meet, the doors it opens, the opportunities
Yeah.
to reach and help more people,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
you have opened my eyes too to something I've been so reluctant to do. One of the hardest things about that book for me is you cannot believe what a private person I am.
Mm.
And I felt like, and I kind of literally did in that book, take my clothes off in that book. And I mean, that was really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
And something that's been very hard for me to do that I know I need to do is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I may actually post my first reel maybe this weekend on Instagram.
Fantastic.
I may. I
Yeah.
have been so reluctant because it's not comfortable for
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
and it's awkward for me. And you know, I I don't I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with it. And yet I know that, as I'm speaking at all these book clubs,
Yeah.
and that's one of the first things they say to me, are you doing this? You need to be doing this.
Yeah.
People would appreciate what you have to say.
Yeah.
So anyhow, you have, just looking at some of the things that you've done, and I mean, you're so relaxed and comfortable and a wonderful interviewer. So I don't know. Like you
Uh,
say, get off the bench, right?
Look, I think so. I do. I just think get off the bench, put your confidence cap on, courage, action, and keep practicing. Just keep doing it. But something you said in there is really good about the book. And you said, uh, now what was it? Now I've forgotten. But my point was, and is oh yeah, you were like self-help, like how do I help people? But I think the key is that it's about not people not feeling alone. So, sometimes you might think, well, what have I got to say? I don't have the qualifications and screw the publishing world for saying that to you, because I think that just sucks because you've got so much lived experience. But it's not even so much, hey, look at all the stuff I know and look what I can share with you and look how I can teach you. It's the fact that people out there feel like they're the only person going through something. And when they read your book, they're like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And to me, that is a greater feeling, than somebody telling you how you should feel or somebody giving you all this advice. It's the fact that I'm not alone. There's someone else that feels my pain. And I think that's one of the biggest burdens we have in society is that so many people feel like what they're going through is they're the only person going through it, is because we try to put on this brave face all the time, and try to be, excuse me, everything's fantastic in my life and bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And if only we would be more honest and more authentic and say, I screw up. I bloody get it wrong. I have biases. I bloody this, I that. People go, oh shit, I'm actually just human. I'm actually just normal. But we're so reluctant to just be ourselves because we fear that
Right.
someone's going to judge us or criticize us or reject us. So I'm rapt that you've done it, and I'm annoyed with the publishing. I'm just annoyed with the industry for saying that you don't have the credentials. What a load of crap. I'm so glad you've done it. I just want to talk about though this. not feeling alone, and what your the work you're doing with facing forward and everything is one of the key things for you. And I really want to talk about this is that you have a real issue, you take real issue with, and you do a lot of work to overcome this sort of perception, is that people with facial traumas and burns are always, almost always, I better not say always, but almost always, cast as villains. Do you know, and particularly in the film industry, like I was reading an article from you this morning, from the LA Times that you wrote about um, how many. It was a huge percentage. I can't remember, 60% or something of villains have got scars, have got facial, facial issues or traumas, and that's how we paint them, so that, but any of the heroes, they have perfect faces and they're all good looking and they're all stunning and no scars. And so with Hollywood and all the films have been presenting this to us for, and I imagine, I mean, you reference Phantom the Opera, and
Forever.
that's 50, 60 years old. I'm just guessing, but it's old
Right.
because I remember it when I was a kid, when I was younger. But it's for years and years and years. And you also talked about the beauty mystique. That this whole thing, that this is, we're talking centuries of well, not filmmakers as such, because that's more new, but of theatre and all of this stuff
Right.
presenting to us to
Right.
convince us, to brainwash us that facial trauma means bad. If anyone looks ugly, it's bad, like, and they look ugly, like that's terrible. And so we should not trust them, and they should be the bad people in society. But if you're good looking, and you should be the hero. And if you think about it, is I had not thought about it, to be honest, and until I read your article this morning. I had not thought about in such depth. It really struck me actually when I was reading it that, my God, we really have been brainwashed to believe that facial trauma and facial burns and even burns, body burns, it
Right.
it's such a bad thing. But it's terrible that this has been allowed to continue, and that all these people like you, who are trying to live in a disfigured body that is no fault of your own, and you still have the same, even though you've talked about two identities, you still are the same person inside,
Right.
and you're trying to present yourself as, this is still me. I'm still just this nice
Right.
person who's always been here. It's bloody terrible. And you said in that article as well that some of the, this actually brought me to tears this morning, to be honest. I had to get in the shower and bloody stop sooking. You were talking about um your own personal discrimination, going into a restaurant and the waitress trying to place you at the back of the restaurant so people didn't have to look at you. People on an aeroplane sitting next to you being asked to change seats away from you. That just broke my heart reading that. Still, it's breaking me up now just thinking about it. And you said the most painful of all was being completely ignored. And there's one thing that humans need: to feel seen, heard, and valued, and
For
to
sure.
be, oh, it's really getting to me, talking about this, but to be completely ignored is the worst thing uh, for a human being. I don't know if you've heard of that. Excuse me while I wipe my tears. I don't know if you've heard of the rice experience, the rice experiment from, I think it was David Suzuki, and he had three like jars of rice, wet rice, and one of them he wrote on a label love, and on another label he wrote hate, and on another he didn't do a label for the third jar. And every morning he would tell the jar of rice with love on it, I love you so much. You're the most beautiful rice. I love you. And then he would scream abuse at the hate jar of rice and ignore the other one. And which do you think of those three jars ended up the most moldy and manky? And a lot of people think it was hate, but it wasn't. It was the jar that was
No.
ignored. And this is rice, like This is
Hmm.
without feeling. This is just cellular energy,
Yeah,
going on here.
that's fascinating. Yeah, that's an actual
It's an actual
ex
experiment. Yeah, you
wow.
can look it up, the
Google
rice
it. Yeah.
experiment. Yeah. And so when you were saying, the most painful, and I actually cry when I talk about that experiment because I feel sorry for the rice, but but and I am such a sook, I admit that. But this being completely ignored, I can't imagine the pain of that. And I'm really I haven't done it to you, but I'm really sorry for that experience for you. And I hope in hell that I have not made anyone ever feel like that by unconsciously choosing my own comfort and looking away from someone. I don't recall ever doing, but I'm sure I did. I'm sure I have, and I know it's a terrible feeling, terrible feeling.
I think as humans, we complicate everything that it's so simple. And you mentioned this as well in the beginning, the golden rule. If we would just do unto others as we
Yeah,
would have them do unto us.
yeah,
I mean, it's so simple, but yet it's so complicated because of
yeah,
all those various reasons.
yeah,
And that stigma that you mentioned is so deeply ingrained. Like you
mm,
say,
yeah,
centuries old, even like in religion. I discovered there are 22 biblical verses that um, relate to, how people with disability, it's kind of like the dis-ease,
yeah,
that
yeah,
you're separated from
yeah,
society or you can't offer sacraments or God has to heal you. I mean, it's so pervasive
mm,
in everything that it won't happen in my lifetime, but I am encouraged by some things that I'm seeing. And actually, it's pretty much as far as the facial difference, it's in the community of people with Down syndrome. And I've just really been watching this and researching this too for many, many years. And over the last 20 years, I've seen that the media coverage has gone from being very medicalized, where
mm,
everything you see on TV is either about the person, their condition, and focusing on, how it limits them in
mm,
life, and pathologizes them or something like that. But graduate or fundraising,
mm,
using people and showing them at their worst
mm,
and not showing any of their competencies to play on people's emotions to
yeah,
raise money. That's kind of the way people with
yeah,
disabilities have been featured in film and TV in the early days. But the shows that began to have people, I believe Chris Burke, Life Goes On is the
mm,
show. And he was just a delightful, charming character with agency. The show did really well. It showed a capable, competent young man with
mm,
Down syndrome. And
mm,
then there's a series of shows and actors with Down syndromes over the years
mm,
that show, again, these types of roles. And in the last 3 or 4 years, there have been two films. One's called The Peanut Butter Falcon. If you
mm.
haven't seen it, you'd
No.
love it. You should see
Wow.
it.
All right.
The co-star of that is a young man named Zach Sagan, and with Down syndrome. And the lead, co-star in this film, a controversial role. Most people and scholars agree that this is a very favorable role. And you will see that things that he does and
Mm,
he's thinking on his own and contributing and taking the lead and
yeah.
asking valid questions and all these kinds of things, and showing that agency. Uh, there a few people don't feel like the few people feel like it's patronizing, but they are in the minority. But another film called Champions, which is a delightful film with quite a few actors with Down syndrome.
Wow.
Um, and that's really a delightful one about a kind of a burned out basketball coach that takes on a team, and
Mm,
really a wonderful depictions.
yeah.
But I am encouraged by that. And it's kind of like every once in a while a film will come along or a show will come along that encourages me, and then the filmmakers take 10 giant steps backward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like maybe 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, NBC here in the States carried a series called The Irrational. Now, the star of that show was a man who actually it was a prosthetic burn on his face. But the show wasn't all about the burn.
Mm,
The actor and the character had been burned in an explosion. He was a professor. He was a capable, competent man with a full life. And that's what we need. But even in that situation, you have an actor with the prosthetic
mm,
instead of the real person
yeah.
with the
Yeah.
burns. There are not a lot of actors, but somebody like J.R. Martinez could have played that role.
Yeah.
But, you'll see that's one of the things that is very upsetting as well. The people, the Hollywood actors who play these roles that take on some sort of disfigurement or disability, they win Academy Awards
Mm, yeah.
very, very often for
Yeah.
portraying this. Whereas the people that have the actual condition, we can't even get a walk on in a commercial.
Yeah.
It would be wonderful if we could just incidentally appear in commercials for
Mm,
Nike or Target or whatever brand that it might be,
mm,
not just around the time for the Paralympics. And
mm,
then that presents a whole another issue of if you've got a visible difference, that if you're not a Paralympian, period,
yeah.
always challenge me
Paralympian.
to
Yeah.
say my
Yeah. Yeah.
Paralympian, or a superhero. We see that in the
Mm,
films, a few, like in the Marvel, a few of the films, the superhero will have a facial disfigurement, but then that comes with superpowers.
mm,
So then what message is that giving the
mm,
public?
mm,
That, okay, if you're a superhero, well, maybe you're an okay guy, we'll include you, you're acceptable. Or if you're a Paralympian, and have, as the society likes to say, overcome, and it's not about overcoming. We don't need to overcome, and we don't exist to inspire. That's
mm,
not
mm,
that's not why God left me on this planet. I
mm,
mean, I'm thrilled, and grateful that I can inspire somebody else, but that's not my reason
mm,
for being on
mm,
this planet. Um, but there's not an in between for all those other people you just mentioned,
mm,
that and then you're just excluded. I'm there was it was something else I was really passionate about. I can bet my life that even in Australia, you've probably heard notable people everywhere say at some time, like, if you could see her, you could be her. Or I never saw somebody that looked like me on TV. So I never believed that I could do
mm.
what that person. I mean, haven't you heard
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I have.
before?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's very prevalent here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very prevalent. You hear it all the time. And yet, people that look like us, that look like me, we are invisible unless we're the subject of a documentary about what happened to us, or unless, we're that villain or the pitiful outcast. And most people that do not have a disability or a disfigurement are not aware that they meet people with these conditions on TV or
Mm,
at the movies.
mm,
And that's why, going back, like your comments before are so true. it's terrible that that's how we're presented. But you know what? I don't know how it is in Australia, but here in the United States, there was a time that Black African Americans were
Mm.
viewed in a totally and portrayed very unfavorable
Oh,
on
we've
television.
got it worse here, where
Yeah,
our Aboriginal people are still terribly discriminated against.
right.
It's
And
yeah,
it's only, I mean, of course, all the civil rights and
mm,
everything that's contributed to that, but a big part of that has been television and film.
yeah,
Because as you started having more Black actors
mm,
and not being the criminal,
mm,
in the film, um, as you change their depictions,
yeah,
that the attitudes begin to change and have
mm,
changed dramatically.
mm,
And the same thing with gay
mm,
people, that un, until and I knew that probably is the moment that I said that this wonderful, wonderful show, Will and Grace, that
yeah,
came
yeah,
out
yeah,
in America. I don't know if that aired or not.
yeah,
That was a groundbreaking show
mm,
that changed attitudes,
yeah,
that helped us move forward and changed our thinking and, our bias and
yeah,
educate us. And that's my dream for people particularly with facial differences.
yeah,
But as I said, it won't happen in my lifetime. And, you know, we in here in America, the only other time that the ones I've mentioned that we see people with sort of facial differences or differences on their skin is dermatological ads.
yeah.
Now I know in the UK they don't have them. Do you have them in Australia?
Well, I don't watch
Can they?
TV, so
Okay. Well,
I
that's
don't
how
watch
you keep your
ads. So
sanity.
yeah, that's. I watch Netflix, but I don't watch TV, so I don't know
There
about
you go.
ads. But
There you go. Well, here we have dermatology, these ads, major, huge pharmaceutical
wow,
companies
yeah,
that
yeah,
have these ads where they literally, one that just made me outraged. I did a research presentation on this one a couple of years back in the Appearance Matters conference. Um, was an ad that there was a character named Ned. And Ned literally pulled up a car, like a limousine. He pulled up in a car, and there was a red carpet. He was going into the theater. And as he got out of the car, they go introducing Ned's plaque psoriasis. They
oh, what?
introduced a human being by his condition
Oh,
and has
jeez.
him going into this theater. And all of these ads talk about the fact that the whole emphasis is getting clear skin
Yeah, yeah,
so that you
yeah. You can
might
look
be able
beautiful.
to have some sort of relationship,
My God. Yeah,
and
yeah,
forget ever being intimate with somebody if you've got one of these conditions. I mean, these are what these ads,
yeah.
you know, imply.
Selling
And
your beauty.
not every one of them. There are a few companies that really only one major company here in the States that talk about, helping you feel better and not be in pain and agony
Mm,
and get better. But things like that
mm,
just perpetuate it. The one of the researchers, Desmond Morris, I believe, I think that's right. I may be misquoting him, but flawless skin and flowing hair are the two most desirable human traits that people want.
wow.
Flawless skin. Now you think about that
I
and
don't
you
know
watch,
anyone.
it's like having Barbie's figure. Do you know
That's
anybody
right.
that has a
Yeah,
Barbie body?
yeah.
That's another podcast. But that's what the beauty
Mm,
industry
yeah.
sells. And although I do have to give credit, there are quite a few companies and organizations that have more and more and more diversity, and we do applaud them. But still, the only facial difference that in a favorable position is vitiligo. And, in the world of disfigurement, just like the world of disability, there are hierarchies of acceptance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Winnie Harlow's, I mean, she's stunning, the model Winnie
Yeah.
Harlow, and she's really done so much. And there are others with vitiligo, and I'm thrilled for all of them that the opportunities they're getting, and they're opening that door. They
Yeah.
definitely are. Um, of people being more accepting. And there are, more and more is happening in the UK, and a wonderful organization I want to be sure and mention that my nonprofit is a member of is called Face Equality International.
Mm.
And there are 37 global nonprofits, all working with people with facial differences and disfigurement
Wow. That's
and around the globe. And,
mm,
primarily where I see a lot of positive things are in the UK happening, with models with
mm.
disfigurement, um, that you're seeing that more and more. Um, but we've got,
A long
you
way to
know,
go.
long, long, long way to go.
Yeah.
So
And you
again,
hit
I appreciate, oh, you go ahead. What you got?
oh no, it's all right. No, no. I was just gonna say you hit the word on the head. It's acceptance. That's the just accepting that every single person on this world is going through something, has been through something, has got a story, wants to love and be loved, wants to be free of pain as much as possible, hurts when they get hurt, they bleed. Like every single person just wants happiness and peace. And I mean, that's a dream boat. We can't have that all the time, but we're all striving for the same thing, and yet we all hurt each other. We have to measure and judge and compare and compete, and I don't have a competitive bone in my body. I can't stand it. I, I'm not perfect by any means, not at all, but I don't understand why we have to keep hurting each other, and why we can't just accept each other for who we are. And I'm not talking about accepting people who harm people, because
Right.
I'm not very quick to accept people who harm other people, but if people are just doing their thing and they're not doing any harm to anyone, why just accept them for who they are and just say good day. Don't ignore them. Just say good day. And smile at people. And I think we underestimate the healing power of a smile. Just that little bit of acknowledgement to somebody should
Yeah.
do
And
it more.
you've touched on so many things, and people don't even realize what a gift it is to be able to smile. For
Yeah.
almost a year, I couldn't smile
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
couldn't open my mouth to smile. And
Mm,
people with Mobius syndrome, they can't smile.
mm,
So, but a smile is absolutely a universal greeting,
mm.
and it expresses warmth, and it's so easy.
Isn't it?
Also something you said that I very important to me. When people meet me, they know something major happened to me. They
Mm.
may not know what or why or that sort of thing, but they know something happened. But other people that do not have visible scars have scars
Yep.
inside,
Yep.
hidden scars.
Yep.
Again, just like you,
Mm,
the loss of your beloved
mm.
sister. I think it's really important. Like one of my favorite quotes is to be alive. To be alive at all is to have scars. I think that's
Yep.
Steinbeck
I
said that,
agree. Yeah.
and that just like you're saying, we can't always see them. Lots of times I see them in people's eyes, if we take the time to really look at
Yes.
somebody's eyes.
I agree.
But so important, and just, like you do what you can to,
Mm.
as Mother Teresa said, the thing about never that always uh, make feel people feel better than they did before they
Yep.
encountered you, something to that
Yep. Yep.
effect.
Yep.
To do that. And you said touch on something else, but that one may have escaped me now.
Mm.
But yeah, just so many things. And again, just for all of us to do what we can do in our realm of influence,
Yeah.
where, to help one another, you know.
Well, if every one of us impacts 10 people, which isn't hard to do, and it's enough of an impact that then those 10 impact another 10, we're quickly at 100 people. It's actually not hard. It's not a hard thing to do, but yeah, I think the world gets a little bit settled on self-protection and self-focus, and I think I think that and we can't all be perfect and we can't all do it right every time. But I think if we live by the 80-20 rule, which is not what people think I'm going to say, is that if 80% of the time we can be focused on the greater good and we can focus beyond ourselves, and make the world a better place 80% of the time, which is not hard to do, what a different world we would have. What a different world we'd have. And anyway. Well, I've absolutely loved this conversation. I just, you know, it's it's been hard, because but I like to cry. I don't like to cry, but I sook a lot of the time. It's actually something else I didn't mention that in the article you wrote is that there are 100 more than 100 million people worldwide right now with a facial condition. And that is a lot of people. And we are bound to encounter somebody in our lifetime, but I would say within every year, every 6 months, And if we actually look up from the ground, and look at people around us and with the intention to catch eye contact and smile, we would probably see that there are a hell of a lot more than we actually think there are. Um, I want to finish with this. What would your key message be to people like me, people who um, don't live with burns or a facial trauma, who are very lucky, in actual fact, extremely blessed not to have to live with that. What would be your key message to anybody in that situation when they come across somebody like you? What helps the most? What do you want us to do?
You just touched on it. If you're able to smile, just smile, say hello. And it depends on each of us where we are at that moment that we encounter somebody else, at our energy level, how our day's been going
Yeah.
on. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything extensive. Just treat each other, like somebody with a disability or disfigurement, just like anybody else. That's all we
Mm.
want.
Yeah.
If you want to have a little bit more of a conversation, try to connect with something where you are, with your environment or the event that you're at, or just ask a question if you want to engage with someone that that connects with the environment and the situation, and we are curious, curious, curious creatures. And that's a wonderful thing to have curiosity.
Mm.
But it's important to remember that no one is entitled to know what happened to somebody else, no matter how much we want to know. And I'm not saying that it's not okay. I think people have to use their common sense and judgment and get a feel for a person. You know, I'm I'm somewhat in the minority among my peers and my recommendations in this. There's a whole issue of disclosure and
Mm.
non-disclosure,
Mm.
wherein many of my peers disagree that they think it's your responsibility to make me comfortable in a situation and that you should know how to do that.
Mm.
I
Mm.
take a different stand on that because nobody teaches
No.
you how to do that
Yeah.
unless you might have learned from your parents. There are no programs in schools
Mm.
about this. I know that most people worry about saying or doing the wrong thing
Mm.
when they're interacting with somebody that it can be awkward. I think it's an opportunity to educate the public about what's going on with me so that the next time you meet somebody that looks
Yeah.
like me, you're going to
Yeah.
go, oh gosh, that person's a burn survivor.
Yeah.
You're not going to wonder what happened. Now, the research tells us that my take on this will further marginalize us because, the scholars say that, again, it's society's responsibility to
Mm.
make us more comfortable. We're the ones living with the disfigurement or the difference. But if that's what people want to do, then we need to have that as part of education.
Mm.
Some of these programs I told you that I did, that the social and emotional training, that's kind of non-existent
Yeah.
unless you're in a private school.
Mm.
Um, so, it is a societal issue. It's a media issue. It's a beauty industry issue. It's a
Mm.
bias issue. It's something that needs a lot of education. But for just us, people going about our lives, just try your best to think of us as as just a different variation
Mm.
of everybody else.
Mm.
Why can't there be, I love flowers. I share a passion that your guest, I loved listening to this interview with Matthew.
Yeah.
He is a fascinating young man,
Yeah.
but I love photography,
Yeah.
and I like to take photographs of flowers.
Yeah.
And there are a zillion different kinds of
Yeah.
flowers, and they're all beautiful,
Yeah.
you know? And just like even one of the things that I love about humanity of everybody, yeah, if we had a photograph right now of a million people, unless they're identical twins,
We all
they're
look different. Yes,
no.
I know. I
So
know.
what I want people to understand, I don't like to use the word normalize,
Mm.
but that's kind of what I want it to be. I'm normal, just like
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I agree.
that's what we're striving for. But that takes education
Yeah.
and societal change
Mm.
to make that happen. So I think the best we can hope for is that smile. The
Yeah.
smile, the wave, the eye contact, if you can make eye contact.
Yeah.
Those, uh, all of the 90% of communication is
Yeah,
nonverbal,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So though, and just an any kind of openness at
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
would be, and not to want to fix us,
Mm. Yeah.
you know, that just accept us like we are.
Yeah. Shouldn't be too hard, but we're a fun, and I actually think it's a dual responsibility. It's I do. I think that you're right. We need if you're not educated, you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know what you don't know. But I think that we all of us want our rights, and I think that if we want our rights, we also have to have responsibilities. And I think it's up to all of us to make a better world, and I don't think that the onus should be on one side or the other. I think it's all of us need to be working
Right,
together for the same
right.
thing. But
I
well, I've
I
absolutely loved this
wholeheartedly,
conversation. Clearly people are going to want to buy your book or follow up with you, or and I know you're available for keynotes and stuff like that. So where can people find you? Where's the best place?
just go to my website at Facing Forward Inc. at
Yep.
inc.org. Yeah,
It's easy.
that's
Facingforwardinc.org.
.org. Right,
That's easy.
right,
And
right,
and you're also on LinkedIn if people want to connect with you there.
right. LinkedIn and Facebook, and who knows, maybe
Yeah, I was
Instagram.
going to say
We'll
now we're
see.
starting Instagram. Who knows?
We'll see if I can get off the bench.
Well, we'll send people to your website first. That's
Yeah,
a safe
and
bet.
also just Char, at facingforwardinc.org. So do you
Yep.
want me to repeat it?
Yep. SHAR.
That's
Oh,
CHAR.
CHR, yeah,
Yeah,
at
char
facing
at
forward dot inc.
facingforwardinc.org. Yeah.
Inc.org. Yep.
Right.
Okay. Well, and that would be good. So if you're sort of, um, I think that would be more for, and this is my assumption, and I might be wrong, more for people that are, wanting to get more help, but also if people are wanting to help you share your story or share your, views or share your perspective or share your all of the messages that you're trying to make, people can still get in touch with you and in some way help you to do that. So
That
I,
would be awesome.
mm,
That'd be
yeah,
terrific.
I think it'd be wonderful.
And I
Well,
look forward to us talking again.
so do I. And before, by the way, we were
Connecting.
talking about Sam before, and of course that's Sam Horn, because everyone knows how much I love Sam. And so
I,
uh,
I know.
Charlene,
Yeah, we'll have to, because I want to hear how you met Sam. I've forgotten.
oh God, I can't remember. Oh yes, I do remember a friend. Uh, I was going through a bit of a stage where I'm like, oh, I just don't know what to, I was, just those reflective stages like we all go through, like I'm sort of going through now. And it was, I remember somebody I spoke with at a conference in Michigan, and she was talking about someone, and she talked about Sam, and I said, "Who's Sam?" And she said, "Oh, Sam Horn. I'm on in a book club with her, or she does book readings or something. I've used her for coaching before." And she mentioned a couple of other people, but as soon as I looked Sam up, I just saw straight away, no, she's the one I want to connect with, and that was several years ago, not 20, but 5 or 6, something like that. And
Uh,
yeah, and then I spent a few days with her in Hawaii last year, and
yeah,
doing
yeah.
the clarity stuff. And yeah, I've absolutely love Sam. Everybody knows I probably bore everyone shitless. I talk about Sam, but I think she's wonderful, and so that's
I
how
agree
you and I have met. And
wholeheartedly. She is a remarkable woman and one of the most creative people I have ever met in my
yeah,
life. Yeah,
she's got a unique
wonderful
ability to
and
read
generous.
generous, and she can read between the lines, and she
Mhm.
can know who you are in an instant, and it's a very rare
Yeah,
skill. So yeah, absolutely, Dora.
very special woman.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will see each other again, you and I, and
Uh,
I hope a stack of people tune into this. And you know what? If you and I, if this conversation between you and I can change one person, just one person's perspective and their thoughts, I'm not saying that anyone's mean. I'm not saying that, but just sometimes we don't think about it. Sometimes we just go about our life, and if we're not impacted by a burns victim or someone with trauma, we don't think about it. It doesn't become part of our lives. But if just one person listening to this goes far out, I've never thought about that, I'm going to do something different, then this episode's been successful.
and I just want to change one word for you. I
No,
want you to
victim.
switch
I know.
survivor, survivor.
Survivor. As soon as I said it, I thought that's not the right word, Karen. Don't do that. Survivor. Yeah,
Survivor.
exactly.
Okay. All
That
right. Well, thank you again so much. Been
my
delightful talking with you.
my absolute pleasure. It's been wonderful talking to you too, and I'll chat again with you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I was going to say good night, but still good morning
No, it's
to
good morning
you.
for me. Yep, I've still got my day to
Okay.
do.
Okay. Bye bye.
All right. See you. Bye bye.